Good morning, and welcome to World in 15, your trusted source for comprehensive coverage of today's most pressing events, delivered with accuracy, integrity, and insight.
The cockroach that emerged from your sink drain and scuttled under the fridge. Most likely a German cockroach, and its ancestors have been pestering people for over 2,000 years in southern Asia, according to a new study. We have Shelby reporting on this.
Published on May 20 in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the research highlights the insect's journey from scavenging in ancient Asian civilizations to inhabiting modern kitchens. This journey closely aligns with significant historical shifts in global commerce, colonization, and war. German cockroaches, scientifically known as Blattella germanica, are now ubiquitous in cities across the United States and around the world. While they first appeared in scientific records 250 years ago in Europe, leading to their German moniker, their origins have remained somewhat mysterious. To uncover how these cockroaches spread globally, Dr. Qian Tang and his collaborators sought local specimens from scientists and pest control experts worldwide. They collected 281 samples from 57 sites in 17 countries and studied their DNA to trace their evolution. Our main purpose was to show how a species can travel with humans and how genetics can fill in the gaps in historical records, said Tang, an evolutionary biologist and postdoctoral research associate at Harvard University. Genomic data from these samples revealed that the modern cockroach lineage extends much further back than 18th century Europe. According to the research, the insect evolved from the wild Asian cockroach, Blattella asahani, around 2,100 years ago. Tang and his colleagues speculate that during this time, people in what is now India or Myanmar began planting crops in the Asian roach's natural habitat. The insects adapted to include human food in their diet and moved into human households. A millennium later, as trade and military activities increased between southern Asia, the Middle East, and later Europe, domesticated cockroaches spread westward, likely hitching rides in soldiers' and travelers' lunch baskets. The genetic analysis suggests the insects first entered Europe around 270 years ago, coinciding with Swedish naturalist Carl Linnaeus's description of them in 1776, shortly after the Seven Years' War. The cockroaches then made their way from Europe to the Americas about 120 years ago, according to the study. Back to you, John.
Thanks for that update.
10 years ago, Dr. Jeff Lichtman, a professor of molecular and cellular biology at Harvard University, received a small brain sample in his lab. Despite its tiny size, the 1 cubic millimeter of tissue was packed with 57,000 cells, 230 millimeters of blood vessels, and 150 million synapses. We have Anthony reporting on this.
It was less than a grain of rice, but we began to cut it and look at it, and it was really beautiful, he said. But as we were accumulating the data, I realized that we just had way more than we could handle. Lichtman and his team eventually amassed 1,400 terabytes of data from the sample, equivalent to the content of over 1 billion books. After a decade of close collaboration with scientists at Google, this data has now been transformed into the most detailed map of a human brain sample ever created. The brain sample originated from a patient with severe epilepsy. Lichtman explained that it's standard procedure to remove a small portion of the brain to stop the seizures and then examine the tissue to ensure it's normal. But it was anonymized, so I knew next to nothing about the patient, other than their age and gender, he said. To analyze the sample, Lichtman and his team first cut it into thin sections using a diamond-edged knife. The sections were then embedded into a hard resin and sliced very thinly, about 30 nanometers thick, or roughly 1,000th of the thickness of a human hair. They were virtually invisible, if it weren't for the fact that we had stained them with heavy metals, which made them visible when doing electron imaging, he said. The team ended up with several thousand slices, which were picked up with a custom-made tape, creating a sort of film strip. If you take a picture of each of those sections and align those pictures, you get a three-dimensional piece of brain at the microscopic level. This is when the researchers realized they needed help with the massive amount of data, as the resulting images would take up a significant amount of storage. Lichtman knew that Google was working on a digital map of a fruit fly's brain, released in 2019, and had the right computer hardware for the job. He contacted Viren Jain, a senior staff research scientist at Google, who was involved in the fruit fly project. There were 300 million separate images. In Harvard's data, Jane said, "What makes it so much data is that you're imaging at a very high resolution, the level of an individual synapse. And just in that small sample of brain tissue, there were 150 million synapses." To interpret the images, scientists at Google used AI-based processing and analysis, identifying the types of cells in each picture and how they were connected. The result is an interactive 3D model of the brain tissue, representing the largest dataset ever made at this resolution of a human brain structure. Google made it available online as Neuroscience, and a study was published in the journal Science with Lichtman and Jain among the co-authors. Back to you, Bella.
Thanks for that update.
Greater spotted eagles, already a vulnerable species, are now facing another threat: the war in Ukraine. A recent study published in the journal Current Biology reveals that these eagles have been forced to deviate from their usual migration paths due to the conflict, exposing them to dangerous events as they traverse Ukraine. We have Jensen reporting on this.
The International Union for Conservation of Nature lists the greater spotted eagle as vulnerable. These eagles have been largely eradicated from Western and Central Europe, but they still find a refuge in Polesia, a large wetland region bordering Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. Researchers from the UK and Estonia tracked the eagles' movements, noting that on March 1, 2022, a week after Russia invaded Ukraine, the first of 21 tagged greater spotted eagles crossed into Ukraine on its usual migration. When the conflict started in February 2022, we were kind of watching things unfold on the news like everyone else, but sitting there also with the feeling that we know our birds are about to pass through that area and wondering what that might mean for them, said Charlie Russell, the lead study author and a conservation scientist and ornithologist at the UK's University of East Anglia. Using conflict data and GPS tracking, the researchers quantified the impact of the war on the migratory behavior of 19 eagles traveling northward to breeding grounds in southern Belarus between March and April 2022. The study found that the eagles significantly deviated from their usual flight paths compared to pre-conflict migrations from 2019 to 2021, resulting in longer and more indirect routes to their breeding grounds. Although researchers did not have direct observational evidence to pinpoint the exact stimuli affecting the birds, they speculated that noise and light from military activities might have influenced their behavior. The deviations were more pronounced in areas with higher military activity, but individual responses varied. As a result of these deviations, the eagles had to travel further, and their migrations took longer to complete. For example, females spent an average of 246 hours traveling to breeding grounds, compared to the pre-conflict average of around 193 hours. The eagles traveled an average of 85 kilometers, 53 miles, further, with one extreme case of a bird flying an extra 250 kilometers, 155 miles, compared to previous years. Males traveled more slowly, averaging a speed of 7.66 meters, 25 feet, per second, down from the pre-conflict average of 9.75 meters, 32 feet per second. Outside of Ukraine, the researchers observed no difference in migration performance and deviation patterns, indicating that the conflict specifically impacted the eagles' behavior within the affected region. Back to you, John.
Thanks for that update.
High levels of lead detected in authenticated locks of Ludwig van Beethoven's hair suggest that the composer suffered from lead poisoning, which may have contributed to the numerous ailments he endured throughout his life, including his famous deafness, according to new research. We have Alana reporting on this.
In addition to his hearing loss, Beethoven experienced recurring gastrointestinal issues, 2 attacks of jaundice, and severe liver disease. It is believed that he died at the age of 56 from liver and kidney disease. The quest to understand the root causes of his many health problems has been complex, something Beethoven himself hoped would eventually be unraveled. He expressed a desire for his ailments to be studied and shared so that the world will be reconciled to me after my death. An international team of researchers embarked on a mission nearly a decade ago to partially fulfill Beethoven's wish. They analyzed locks of his hair using DNA analysis to determine which ones were authentic and sequenced Beethoven's genome from these authenticated samples. Their findings, published in a March 2023 report, revealed that Beethoven had significant genetic risk factors for liver disease and a hepatitis B infection before his death. However, the results did not shed light on the causes of his deafness, which began in his 20s, or his gastrointestinal problems. Beethoven's genome has been made publicly available, allowing researchers worldwide to explore unanswered questions about his health. In the meantime, scientists continue to study the authenticated locks of his hair, uncovering new insights. Recent findings, published in a letter in the journal Clinical Chemistry, indicate that Beethoven's hair contains high concentrations of lead, as well as arsenic and mercury. These elements remain trapped in the composer's hair nearly 200 years after his death. These discoveries provide new perspectives on Beethoven's chronic health issues and offer a deeper understanding of his life and struggles as a composer. Back to you, Bella.
Thanks for that update.
Dr. Randall Voss, a professor of neuroscience at the University of Kentucky College of Medicine, often receives reminders of the unique status of his research subjects, aquatic salamanders known as axolotls. During outreach events, people express enthusiasm about meeting these creatures, drawn to their charming appearance, which includes wide eyes, upturned mouths, and pastel pink coloring. Their Muppet-like look has made them internet sensations and popular in various forms of merchandise, such as Girl Scout patches and hot water bottles. We have Jordan reporting on this.
Axolotls have gained even more fame since being introduced to the video game Minecraft in 2021. Despite their popularity, the story of axolotls is also one of scientific discovery, environmental exploitation, and efforts to reconnect humans with nature. The name axolotl comes from Nahuatl, the indigenous Mexican language spoken by the Aztecs and still used by about 1.5 million people today. The animals are named after the Aztec god Axolotl, who, according to legend, transformed into a salamander. The original pronunciation in Nahuatl is A-H-O-L-O-A-T, though A-C-K-S-A-H-T. Bull is commonly used in English. Axolotls belong to a class of animals called amphibians, which also includes frogs. Amphibians lay their eggs in water, and these eggs hatch into water-dwelling larval states. While most amphibians undergo metamorphosis to become land-dwelling adults, axolotls remain in their larval state throughout their lives, never transitioning to live on land. They retain their juvenile appearance, which includes frilled external gills used for breathing underwater. Axolotls are found only in the wild in lakes of Comilco in Mexico City. The reason they don't transform into land-dwelling adults remains a scientific mystery. Dr. Luz Zambrano, a professor of zoology at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, suggests that the abundant resources in lakes of Comilco may have made it advantageous for axolotls to remain in their larval state, conserving energy by not undergoing metamorphosis. This unique adaptation and the challenges it poses for survival in a changing environment make axolotls a fascinating subject of study for scientists like Dr. Voss, as well as beloved creatures for enthusiasts around the world. Back to you, John.
Thanks for that update. Thanks for tuning in to World in 15 for your daily dose of news and updates. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on breaking stories and insightful analysis.